Welcome to Backyard Forestry. I'm Richard Kelsky, Vice President of the New Jersey Forestry Association. Tonight's presentation is SADC Development Easements on Private Woodlands in New Jersey. Tonight's guest is Brian Wilson, Deputy Executive Director, New Jersey State Agricultural Development Committee. This presentation is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to constitute specific legal, tax, professional, or other advice. No claims, promises, or guarantee are made about its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or suitability. We encourage landowners to seek professional advice from their attorneys, accountants, foresters, and other professionals concerning their woodlands and otherwise. Bill S-699 was signed into law in early 2026, establishing a program under the SADC to acquire development easements on privately owned woodlands. The law contains specific eligibility, appraisal, and funding provisions of the program, while also requiring the SADC to adopt program-specific rules and regulations for implementation within a year. This presentation will cover the underlying law, easement basics, the ongoing process for developing the rules and regulations for the program and their anticipated implementation, the general expectations for the program, applications and ongoing requirements after an easement is established. You see a note down here called planning versus circumstances. The reason I want to bring that to your attention, particularly if you're a forest landowner, is that I really encourage you to stay with this program, this webinar, from the beginning to the end, because you need to get educated on everything this program touches, whether or not you ultimately enroll in this program. But my feeling as a woodland owner is that you are much better off having your life relating to your property and your family dictated by planning rather than circumstances. We all have a risk of becoming ill, passing away, needing to move, needing to care for a family member, et cetera, et cetera. And so part of this presentation is to become educated on this program, but what this is an option for landowners. And so once understanding how options exist and what their terms are very important. We will be having another estate planning webinar later in the year, as we did last year, but it'll be a little bit more tuned to the actual landowner options that exist today, and which will include this program. And I think it's very important that landowners participate in all of these educational events so they can keep their options open. Let me introduce you to Brian Wilson. I've really enjoyed getting to know Brian through the preparation for this presentation and through other presentations he has made. He's a unique individual because he brings something to the party that others in history have not. Let me give you a little bit about his background. He has a BS in biology from Ursinus College. He became a high school teacher at Allentown High School and then transitioned to become a manager at Princeton Nurseries. He then became a natural resource specialist with the Burlington County Soil Conservation District and then had a 20-year career as an administrator for the Burlington County Agricultural Development Board before taking on his current role at the SADC. But here's the icing on the cake. Brian isn't taking on this role in a vacuum. He brings to this role a passion for agriculture and woodlands because he runs his family's 125-acre preserve farm, 5th generation. And they have 40 acres of managed woodlands under a woodlands management plan. So he knows from whence he speaks. So this is a unique opportunity to actually work with someone who's creating rules and regulations that actually has knowledge about how they'll be implemented. So this is a very, very cool thing. And so Brian will be joining this presentation, as you can see on the screen, by a number of members of his staff who he will introduce as we move along. The New Jersey Forestry Association is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We advocate for all forests in New Jersey by supporting responsible, sustainable use and science-based forest management. We're the voice of woodland owners in New Jersey, both public and private. We're a principal provider of forestry education and advocacy programs, and we're a primary resource to officials, regulators, and legislators on all matters affecting forests in New Jersey. I sat down to prepare this presentation And I asked myself, well, what should I tell you about why you should join or donate to the organization? And I prepared this little list. And it starts out with you love our programs, because you wouldn't be here if you didn't love our programs. But you own woodlands. You want to be aware of issues. You care about forests. You're a forest professional, conservationist, an educator, a scientist, a master gardener, public official. You're engaged in urban and community forestry. You serve on a local environmental commission, on and on and on. You own property. You have a woodland management plan, a forest stewardship plan. You're in farmland assessment. All of these things are reasons you should join or donate to the association. And the other thing I thought about was, well, what do we tell? Why do we deserve your support? Well, first of all, our officers and board, we serve without compensation. Not only do we serve without compensation, but we pay to become members of the organization just like others do. And when we go to the annual meeting, we buy tickets just like others do. And we generously give to the organization. So we're not asking people to do what we won't do. And during the course of our existence, we've reviewed and commented on hundreds of proposed bills, regulations, ordinances, and plans which affect the forests and the forest owners in New Jersey. We produce great educational programs. And something people are very concerned about with NGOs today is we treat every dollar with respect. We plan and operate not just for the present, but also for the future of the organization. And our team is broad-based. We have woodland owners, forest professionals, educators, and scientists assisting us. So please consider supporting the NJFA. It's really easy. You just go to njforestry.org, or you use this QR code, and that will take you to the join or donate page. And now, without further ado, we present SADC Development Easements on Private Woodlands in New Jersey with our guest, Brian Wilson, Deputy Executive Director of the SADC. Brian, the floor is yours.
Okay, and do we have the screen share up?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Rich, thanks for that introduction. That was something else. Let me be clear too. This is not just me that's going to present tonight. In a second here, I'm going to introduce the rest of the members of the team, kind of our internal working team on this program. But thank you all for attending. And last I looked, we had, I think, over 100 attendees. This is something we're very excited to be presenting to all of you. A little bit cliche, you know, we're from the government and we're here to help. We absolutely actually hope that is true with this program. And before we say it later, or in case we forget to say it, this is a voluntary program. We're here just to talk about, as Rich said, an opportunity for woodland owners, an opportunity that has never been there in the past. And we're going to kind of explain what that opportunity is. And it's completely a voluntary decision if you wish to participate and sign up for this program or not. So to that end, as Rich said, we're going to talk about this new law, which was just signed into law here in January of 2026. So next slide, please. So I'm going to ask the rest of the kind of what I said is our internal working group here to introduce themselves, starting off with Steve.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Stephen Bruder. I'm the planning manager at the SADC. I'm a licensed professional planner, but I also have always had a soft spot in my heart for forestry. I have a forest science degree from Penn State. And I also manage a woodlot, a family woodlot in Medford Township. So I'm happy to be working on this and happy to be here.
Dave?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave Clapp. I'm the Resource Conservation Program Manager for SADC. I've been working with the department for about 20 years. The first 10 of that was in close partnership with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, working on their programs and becoming a certified planner. I graduated from Rutgers, and my degree's in natural resource management, and I focused heavily on forestry and forest resources as part of that.
Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. We're happy to be here. I'm Stephanie Kreiser, Chief of Acquisition with the SADC. So we do the actual land preservation projects, work directly with landowners to preserve their land. And prior to joining the SADC, I worked for about 20 years in the nonprofit sector with a statewide land conservation organization in New Jersey.
So thank you all again for being here tonight. We hope to kind of get through the formal part of this presentation. We hope to give you enough information, not over burden you with details, but to give you enough to be informed, and then really hope to have some type of interaction here with a Q&A at the end of the presentation. And finally, on one, maybe the last slide or the second to last slide, we actually have another QR code for you that we hope you stick around. We hope you scan that, and it's going to lead you to a survey or a poll. We're trying to get some baseline information from landowners. Tonight's presentation is kind of going to be geared towards the landowner perspective, and we're really just looking for information that will help us craft this program to meet needs, especially landowner needs, and any way we can get feedback, including this poll or survey at the end, is going to be useful to us. So with that said, we'll move on to the next slide. What the heck is the SADC? You may never have heard of us. It's the New Jersey State Agriculture Development Committee. We're an agency that's situated within the State Department of Agriculture. So what do we do? Typically, we're known as the State Farmland Preservation Office, so we acquire easements on farmland that results in them being within the Farmland Preservation Program. We also handle the Right to Farm Act through New Jersey. Typically, right to farm issues are brought to county ag development boards first. Sometimes then through the different processes, they may end up at the SADC. We also support and implement various agriculture development initiatives. You know, it's not just about preserving farms, or now in this case, preserving woodlands. We also really are called to legislatively to serve, to help facilitate a role in the profitability, frankly, of the agricultural industry. And we hope to be able to serve a role in market development as well in the woodland program, not just preserve woodlands, but support those woodlands in a whole host of different ways, whether through management or maybe through marketing of the products or anywhere in between. So what is a woodland preservation easement, or frankly, similar but different to a farmland preservation easement? So some of you may be very familiar with easements, and others of you maybe not so much. So a quick explanation. Really, a landowner voluntarily sells certain rights to their properties, but not the actual land. That image to the right, property rights are often referred to as a bundle of sticks. And each one of those sticks represents things that you can do or rights that you own to the property. When we purchase an easement, which covers the entire property, whether again a farmland preservation easement or in this case a woodland preservation easement, we are buying some of those rights from you, but not all of those rights. Some of those sticks we're buying from you, not all of those sticks. So if you as a landowner voluntarily sell to us certain rights to the property, in exchange, we will place an easement on the property. And that easement is in the form of a document, what we call a deed of easement. And that deed of easement will specify what rights we've purchased from you and what rights you as the landowner continue to hold. And the third bullet here there at the bottom is what's very important to know. Once this easement is in place, you as the current landowner and everyone that succeeds you in ownership down the line is subject to comply with the terms of that deed of easement that you have signed into. Next slide. So a little bit of a disclaimer here. We are still very early on in this process. We are right now out speaking with a whole host of stakeholders, including forestry professionals, those in the world of consulting foresters, those in the world of New Jersey's state foresters, landowners, other groups that may be willing to support us and help us acquire easements, these woodland preservation easements on properties. So again, this is a new opportunity for woodland owners. We're at the very beginning stages of rulemaking. We're just kind of now starting to put some pen to paper to put down ideas based on the statute that's been put in front of us. So again, we're seeking stakeholder involvement, which is why we want to get to a little bit of Q&A here at the end of this presentation. So aside from the statutory requirements, a lot of things are up to discretion of the SADC, up to the discretion of stakeholders and interest groups, and what these rules will look like. What kind of concepts do we want to include? What kind of ideas do we want to include in this program? And our goal is to get through that whole formal process, regulation writing, and the whole process of writing regulations and getting them formally adopted is a daunting process here in New Jersey. Our goal is to get through that process, to have the regulations adopted in early 2027. So sometime later in 2027, we can actually start accepting applications from landowners. Next slide. So let's go to the purpose. What did the legislature tell us in the statute? It directs us, the SADC, to establish the program for the acquisition of these easements on privately owned woodlands. And let me stop there for a second. We really recognize, and I think the legislature recognized, the benefit of privately owned woodland and the need to protect privately owned woodlands and allow you, the landowners, to continue to manage these properties, because in many cases you do a much, much better job. So I think this is a program intended to support that which you're already doing, and maybe through this program make it a little bit easier on you. So the purpose of the program is to promote, here in blue, the preservation and stewardship of lands for agricultural, silvicultural, and horticultural use and production, and to protect the state's forested lands, which is a very general statement, right? That's a very, very broad statement, and gives us a lot of wiggle room in how to get there. Next slide. So what else does the statute tell us? Again, we are to acquire these easements on woodlands. Well, what is a woodland? So that would qualify for this program. The property has to have at least 20 acres of woodland, which they define as 10% canopy cover. So what does this mean? It can't be a 25-acre property with 10 acres of what we'll call traditional tilled agricultural fields, and only 15 acres of woodland with 10% canopy cover. The property has to have 20 acres of 10% canopy cover. The statute further goes on to say it has to be devoted at least in part to ag production or the production of tree or forest products. Moving on down, the property has to be managed in accordance with a forest stewardship plan, a woodland management plan, or a plan approved to a federal forest stewardship program, which we understand the state's forest stewardship plans meet that federal forest stewardship standard. The way we acquire properties, and Steph Kreiser is going to talk a little bit about the acquisition process later. I think one of the reasons why the legislature gave this program to us here at the SADC is that they call for us to go through the acquisition process just like we do with the state's farmland preservation program. And the SADC has been through this process on over 2,500 properties already with farmland. So we really are looking to just mimic this Of course, we're going to tailor it for woodland properties, but the process is going to mimic what we've already been doing for, frankly, 41 years now, actually, as I think about it, of farmland preservation. And the statute also allows us to partner with local partners, whether they're counties, whether they're nonprofits. If a local partner at the county level, or again, a nonprofit, wanted to work with landowners to acquire easements in accordance with this program, that's absolutely fine. And then we would be providing back to that local partner an 80% cost share reimbursement. Next slide. And I'm going to now turn this over to Steve Bruder. He's going to talk a little bit about some of the planning efforts here.
Thanks, Brian. This slide is for those that may be familiar with our traditional farm preservation program, and to understand how, this program is being contemplated a little bit differently than our traditional farm preservation. For partners, county ag boards and agricultural advisory committees at the municipal level, typically for them to get funding for farm preservation, they have to do comprehensive farm preservation plans and include the targeting of parcels in those plans. We are not contemplating that properties that would be eligible for the woodland program would have to be included in a county ag development board or ag advisory committee comprehensive farm preservation plan. Similarly, in the farm preservation program, properties to be eligible for consideration have to be in what's called an agricultural development area. And this is the geographic area that the county ag board delineates as where they want to see ag maintained long term. And these are typically focused around where the best ag resources are, most contiguous ag resources. And so we don't see the need, and there's no requirement that these woodland easements be in those county ag development areas either. The statute allows counties, local partners, and nonprofits to acquire woodland easements, or the SADC can acquire those easements directly. And for those of you that are also familiar with the Right to Farm Protect program, inclusion in this woodland easement program does not affect or impact any of the right to farm protections that a property may otherwise be eligible for. Next slide. So when we started looking at, when we got tasked with this responsibility, we started looking at the scale and distribution of the woodlands to get an idea of what kind of responsibility the SADC would have. And where those properties might be that would qualify for this program. So we did an analysis of forest land with at least 10% canopy cover based on the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection's land use land cover layer to assess where those woodland parcels are that are currently unpreserved. And we'll leave this slide up for a second so you can get to see in your area where those numbers are. And so you can see on the map on the left where the distribution of unpreserved woodlots of at least 20 contiguous acres are. So I would think about these numbers is the maximum potential for properties that could be eligible for the program with the 20-acre minimum contiguous forest size. Next slide.
All right. So I'm going to talk a bit about the process and for acquiring easements. And as Brian said in the beginning, this will run very much like our traditional farmland preservation program. So through rulemaking, we'll have minimum eligibility criteria for what properties would qualify for the purchase of an easement through this program. But we'll also likely establish criteria for ranking and prioritizing applications just to help us internally with processing. We're not sure how many applications we're going to get at once, when this program opens up. So just a way to help smooth that process to begin processing applications. We think that this program will be aimed at properties that are ineligible for our farmland preservation program. So in the traditional program, there are things like tillable acreage requirements to get into that program. So for the woodland program, it would be properties, they may have some traditional ag and some forest, or be completely forested, but they would not otherwise be eligible for farmland preservation. And the process will include, I'll talk a little bit more about the appraisal process, but there will be 2 appraisals done for each property that comes into application, and then a value gets certified that helps us, forms the basis of our offer to a landowner. We will get title work done, a survey, and typical, closing, real estate closing procedures, similar again to how we run the farmland program.
Stephanie, let me jump in real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I think important to note here, it just hit me because this is a largely landowner audience. We don't contemplate there being any fees with this process as well. For you to apply and for us to conduct the local partner to conduct the appraisals and do all of that background information, all the way up to the point where we make you an offer. In the farmland preservation program, there's no fees or costs associated with that placed on the landowner, and we don't think there will be in this process either.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, we pay for all of that due diligence.
The one thing is, though, that from a landowner perspective, we highly recommend that you have your own attorney and that your attorney review each and every document and take you through the process as your expert, because the others, they do not represent you. So yeah, right. The SADC doesn't represent you. You need to have someone represent yourself so that the easement is written as you expect it to be written and has the effects that you think it will have.
Right. And, it is a transaction. So there is a contract for a contract of sale. So having, a professional to review that with you and go through that, we'll explain the process the best that we can, but that's correct. We are not offering any kind of legal or financial representation. So having somebody doing that on your behalf is very helpful.
You will also need to have your accountant review the transaction to determine whether, just in rough terms, it exceeds the purchase price of the property as was originally paid, attributed to that piece of land, and determine whether there are tax consequences associated with that.
Thank you, Rich. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks. Okay, next slide. All right, so a little bit more about the appraisal process and how traditionally we get to an easement value that is then offered to the landowner. So again, there will be two appraisals done, and that appraises the value of the land as the before value. It's the fee simple value of the land as its highest and best use. And then that appraisal includes the value of that land once it's preserved. So once there's a development easement on it, what would that property be worth? That's the after value. So the easement value becomes the difference between those two. So it's the difference between the before value and the after value. That's your easement value. So in this example, say if your property is valued by the appraisal at $7,000 per acre, as is highest and best use, but the after value, that value as a preserved forest, is $4,000. Your easement value, those rights that we're purchasing, are valued at $3,000. That's your traditional appraisal process to get to the easement value. Next slide, please. So last year, we published rules for a statewide formula value for the farmland preservation program. And we're going to do the same, have a customized statewide formula value for the woodland preservation program. What that formula value does is it starts with appraisals, same as just what we talked about, but the basis of the formula becomes that 50% is what it is in the farmland program of that before value. And then onto that, we can add value for particular characteristics of that property that make it a valuable farm, or in this case, a valuable forest. So we're going to, and those get added on. And the reason that we developed the formula is because easement values were declining and there was less interest in the program. The formula enables us to boost offers in most cases for purchasing an easement from a landowner, because we're valuing things that are not typically captured in the appraisal, like size or contiguity to other preserved lands, things like that. So in this case, we'll develop a formula that's customized for desirable attributes of a woodland. What's important to value in a woodland that may not be captured through the appraisal process. And it's important for us to be able to apply a formula like this consistently across the state. So we look for characteristics that are easily identifiable, that are mappable, and science-based. And, we also just, we do recognize that a lot of woodland properties likely have some environmental constraints that could result in lower values. And so the formula could help to boost those values. All right,
So
Dave.
Brian had touched a little bit about once an easement is placed on your property, it's sort of a forever document. We're buying some of those rights from you, and then we hold those rights in perpetuity. So perpetuity could be a very long time. So we wanted to touch a little bit about what your responsibilities would be after preservation. So easement compliance is really where that would fall, making sure that the things that you're doing on your farm and your woodland that you still own are consistent with the restrictions we've placed on the property based on the rights that we've purchased in our easement. One of the things that we anticipate will be in there is active forest management. So there'll be sort of a long-term obligation to manage your forest, either through a forest management or forest stewardship or woodland management plan. And I think for most of the folks that would be interested in this program, I'd expect or anticipate that you've already been actively managing your forest. So while this is now an obligation for more than just tax assessment, it's now an obligation for easement compliance. It shouldn't be really a change in how you do business. The other part that comes along with easement compliance is monitoring. And so I know currently for farmland assessment, you have folks come through your property. Your forester has to certify every year. The state forester comes through or their staff to ensure that you're compliant with your forest management. And we anticipate that will be the same. But what we do for the farmland preservation program is we monitor all of our farms to make sure that they're compliant with our easement terms. And so we look at things like erosion and runoff on our typical farm program, or that you're otherwise consistently following our easement. And so that's an additional obligation. There'd be a monitoring inspection, typically annually, to the farm, where we would look to make sure that you were compliant with your easement. Because you're already doing management and you're used to that, it's really just one more time someone has to visit the farm just to take a look. The other area that comes with post-preservation, it's not just obligations. There are typically some benefits that come along. Um, in the farmland program, we have several different cost share programs, and we're looking to make sure that those benefits will transfer over to the woodland program. So while we can't guarantee this at this point, through our soil and water cost share grant program, there are already several practices that we offer cost share on that could transfer to the woodland program. Windbreak restoration and establishment, stream protection, planting riparian buffers, replanting trees, forest tree stand improvement, TSI, uh, forest tree plantations, and site preparation for natural regeneration are all things that we've had on the books for the wooded portions of our agricultural properties since the early 80s. So those are all practices that we hope will be able to port over to this woodland program. We also have a wildlife fencing grant program that potentially could work for the forest and the woodland side of things. Those are grants to install deer fence to exclude deer. And I think we all know that in many parts of the state, the deer populations are really, really high and make it very difficult for young trees to grow. So wildlife fencing grants we think could be an option for this program. And the last one is new for both programs, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to transfer it over to the woodlands, is a technical assistance program where we have up to $20,000 every 5 years available for people to sign up to hire their own consultants. So in this case, potentially to help pay for the cost of your forester for those annual inspections or for the forest plan. So those are things that we're hopeful we'll be able to offer as benefits to this. Again, we're still looking to make sure that we have the authority to do that, but those are sort of the programs that we hope we'll be able to offer for benefits of being a preserve farm.
And let me jump in there, Dave, to that point. You know, in the farmland preservation program, and again, we're waiting for some legal direction to make sure we can offer these cost share grants to people that have already now preserved their woodlands. This is a commitment on behalf of the state to support you, right? Those that have chosen voluntarily to preserve their farm. This is, and now in this case, your woodland. This is a way, this is an incentive for you, or maybe a reward or a bonus for you and for us to help assist you in the ongoing forever commitment to manage your forest and to manage it in the right way. So again, as Dave said, these cost share programs are only eligible to people that have voluntarily, permanently preserved their properties.
And I should say I did look at the list. I saw there some of our partners from NRCS are on the call, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, for anyone that's not aware, the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service also has substantial grant funding for farms that are preserved or not, including many practices that would be woodland eligible. So if you haven't heard of NRCS, please check them out. They're a great agency. Do a lot of great natural resource conservation work. So the other thing we wanted to talk about was some of the challenges and opportunities we see with this program. And Stephanie had touched on it earlier, landowner interest and outreach to landowners. We are excited and also a little bit scared, to be honest, about what sort of interest we may have in this program. Sort of the theme of our challenges is capacity. This is a brand new program. We have a robust staff, and we have a robust existing agricultural conservation and easement program. And so this is, if it goes as well as we hope it does, it can, we'll have potentially a problem with capacity in being able to assist everyone, which is a good problem to have. We anticipate that capacity issue would start right at the beginning of how we would be able to rank our applications. And again, we touched on trying to streamline some of our application process and some of the valuation process to keep that moving. One of the new things for this program when we talked about monitoring and enforcement is that there is an obligation to continue to manage your forest. And that's an area where the SADC doesn't have as much experience as we think we'll need. So an education component, we think we're going to be able to rely on consulting foresters and some of those existing agreements that landowners have with their foresters and the obligations for farmland tax assessment to meet those implementation needs. But that could be a capacity issue both for consulting foresters and for the agencies. I mentioned staff resources at SADC. We're blessed to have a full staff at this point. But again, this is a new program, and if it's as successful as we hope it would be, staffing could be a capacity issue and a limiting factor for our ability to implement this program. And then our partners at DEP through the Forest Service, we're going to hopefully be able to work with them again to try and limit how many different people have to come to your property and evaluate how you're doing your forestry. Our goal is sort of from the SADC perspective to take a step back from making sure that you're doing the active management and implementation of your woodland management and forest stewardship plans, because there's already folks that look at that. But just making sure that we have those relationships with the appropriate entities and that everyone's on the same page. Those are sort of the things that we're looking forward to, and also the things that we think could be challenges as we move forward. Oh, Brian, you're muted.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, we're getting here towards the end. Another slide or two, and we'll like to start doing some outreach and responding to some of these questions that are in the chat. So we continue to do stakeholder outreach to the county ag development boards, all different people associated in the world of private consulting foresters. We have meetings with the new DEP Forest Service, nonprofits, more landowner type groups, and we continue to work on draft regulations. So what we hope to be able to do is later this year, probably sometime in the fall, do outreach again. I'll be in contact with Rich and NJFA throughout the process, but hopefully maybe this fall or this winter, we'll be able to come back if invited and give some more concrete information on where we think this program is going than we might have at our fingertips right now. So we have a lot of ideas, but we don't want to promise things that won't come true. But hopefully by the fall or the winter, we'll have some more concrete information to share. So with that, I think we'll open it up to questions or responding to what's on the chat. But I also wanted to direct you to this QR code. That's something that, please, you don't need to fill out now, but feel free to go ahead and scan. That is what we're hoping from you all to get information again from you. It's geared towards private land owners. And again, it's just information that we're not just asking questions to ask questions. We're really looking for information that'll help us best create the regulations for this program to be implemented that will serve everyone's needs. I think the vast majority of questions in that survey are optional. So if there's something you just don't, either you're unsure of, you don't understand what we're asking, or you're not comfortable answering, that's absolutely fine. But anything that you're willing to share with us will only be helpful to us. Right? We don't have any other slides after that, right? I think we want to go into the questions. Rich, do you want to jump in and how you want to proceed here?
Sure. Then why don't we just turn right to the Q&A first, and then we'll scan through I would scan through the chat again, even though some of the questions have been answered by audience members. just to get them into the video
Sure.
for future viewers. So if we start with the Q&A, the minimum density question, I assume that's your 10% answer, but you want to take a look at that question. What is the minimum density that allows land to qualify for an SADC woodland easement?
So it's 20 contiguous acres of 10% canopy coverage, which listen, I'm not the one to describe what 10% canopy coverage is. I think it's a pretty low bar, but Dave Clapp, maybe that's for you to jump in. Or maybe you, Rich, maybe you know.
Well, go ahead, Dave, and then I'll jump in.
Well, I'll let you go right to it. I mean, 10% canopy cover. I think there's a couple different ways we could define it, and I know there's some more definitive forestry definitions. So,
look, it's a very modest. I think it's a modest level of cover and a reasonable level of cover. If you have any doubts about whether you meet that requirement, it's simple to ask your forester, who is fully familiar with each of your stands and their density.
and I think the important part of that is it wouldn't take many years to bring an area up to 10% canopy cover. So if you weren't eligible today, now that you know that's a requirement, it would be something you could work in your plan towards.
So here's the next question. Suppose a landowner has 100 acres. Is the program all or nothing, or is it possible to voluntarily put an easement on a portion of the property?
Good question. Don't have a certain answer for you on that one, but the way we currently operate is that we place an easement on the entire property. It's probably going to operate that way. What a landowner always has the option to do is to subdivide off a portion of the property that they don't want under the easement ahead of time, and then the remainder of that parcel would have the easement placed on it. Now, in the easement, in our farmland preservation program, and we expect it to be in woodland, there's this other concept of what we call exception areas. There's small areas of a property where the restrictions don't apply. That exception area is not a separate lot. It's just an area that the restrictions, we haven't bought the rights on a small portion of the property. And that allows landowners to kind of have some flexibility in use. On a typical, let's say a 75-acre farm or even a 200-acre farm, an exception area is usually 2 or 3 acres around the existing house or maybe the existing infrastructure. So that kind of concept, I think, will be allowed, but a 100-acre property, I don't think we would place our easement just on 50 acres and then leave the other 50 acres out. I don't know for sure, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm guessing it would probably be consistent with the number of acres in the plan.
That'll certainly be an element, but again, this program, this easement contemplates both allowing traditional ag on the same property, and those acres will have kind of different restrictions on them, and then the woodland acres will have different restrictions on them. Those restrictions are all in the same document, but the document will make clear these restrictions apply to the traditional ag acres, these restrictions apply to the wooded acres.
And those excluded acres, those exception acres, can they be for a buildable portion of the property if it's undeveloped at this point?
Excellent question. That's what exception areas are for. And for those of you that scan and take this survey, this poll, there's a lot of questions about housing that you may want to build in the future or the like. That's kind of what we're getting at. But those exception areas, again, are typically for around an existing home or where you may want to build a future home, or if you have some kind of non-agricultural or non-woodland type use, maybe you're running a welding shop in the barn kind of thing. We would say, hey, you know what? Put that use in this exception area. Then you don't have to worry about us knocking on your door telling you can't do that. Put it in an exception area, and then we're out of your hair.
I'm just looking over at the chat right now
Sure.
to see what questions were asked previously. Here's a good one. Many landowners with forest stewardship plans are not required to sell forest products. Are they not eligible for the program?
They are eligible. So if you're being the way we read the statute is if it's being managed in accordance with that plan, which has been prepared by your consulting forester and approved by the state forester, then that's good enough for us. What we want to make sure is very clear, though, that that our program won't place prohibitions on the sale of timber or forest products. Did I answer that clearly, Rich?
You did. You're good.
Okay.
Just taking a look at the questions again, there's a bunch further back up. There was an interesting question posed about, so if you sell your property, the easement moves with the land. It's attached to the land. So every subsequent owner will be subject to that easement.
It's recorded in title. Yes.
Right. But somebody asked a good question, which is what incentives would future landowners have to stay in compliance? Because the easement was purchased from the first landowner, let's say.
Yeah. That's part of the due diligence required in almost any real estate transaction. What am I buying and what are my obligations? So a landowner, a future landowner has to know what they're required to do.
One thing, can I add one
Sure.
thing to that is that, because the easement runs with the land, if woodland easements are eligible for those cost share benefits, that subsequent landowner that now owns that land with that easement would be eligible to get those future like cost share benefits because that's related to the easement on that land. If we find out, as we said, we're working on that, but if these easements are eligible for those.
Well, that's a huge benefit. That's a very, very good point. So here's a question that's sort of a fine detail question, but it is one of threshold. So if wooded property is 20 acres, but one of those acres has the house on it, does it then not qualify? And the question really is, I guess, how many acres of woodlands are in the plan, correct? You there, Brian?
Maybe I apologize for not knowing the answer to this. Can a plan, a woodland management plan or a stewardship plan, include the acres immediately around the house?
No, what it typically says is number of acres in the plan, acres for the home site, total acres. And so the question of how the program is administered, you may need to resolve that issue as to whether or not you're measuring based off the plan acres or you're measuring off the acres plus the home site.
Yeah, good. I clearly, I don't think, unless anybody else in the team, I don't think we have an answer for that yet, but a good question.
But it's a great question, and it's something that has to be figured out because there's dozens of permutations and combinations of that, and how they're handled will ultimately have to be determined. So that's really cool.
So this is exactly why we're having this meeting, because these are the things we need to hear.
Exactly. And so I see a question here from somebody that I know. How are wooded wetlands, riparian land, and forests subject to stringent land use permitting rules handled? And
Dave or Steve, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I can take that. So those lands would still be subject to all of their DEP regulatory burdens, but if they're in the forest management plan or forest stewardship or farmland, stewardship plan, they would count towards that 20 contiguous acres, and you could continue to do the management that you would be allowed to do on those areas. So it's my understanding that most areas can still be managed for forestry even within those buffers.
yeah, there was a PS on that question. Management practices may conflict with permit requirements for threatened and endangered species. Well, that's taken into account in every management plan. So they are addressed in the management plan. I'm just looking. There's an idea. Also, I'm trying to get these in the record for you, Brian, so that we don't have to keep referring to a future printout of a chat. I would like to see a floating exception area. For instance, if you tear down an existing home, you can rebuild a new one in a different location, thus moving the exception area. These are interesting questions. I think they're worth noting.
I chuckle. We had a very lengthy conversation internally yesterday about that concept. Certainly understand the benefits of that. I don't want to say yes or no right now. That is certainly on our radar.
Here's someone saying, just confirming we'd still be able to sell log timber once preserved.
Correct. This does not in any way prohibit, and in fact, we may want to encourage, that we just want to be clear. We're not looking to stop that in any way.
It's simply you do what your plan says.
Exactly. All under the caveat of your approved plan, then it meets our requirements.
Yeah. I know this is a valuation question, but I think it's worth noting valuation criteria could be value as a wildlife corridor. And clearly that's one of the appraisal characteristics I believe I've seen in other transactions.
And could possibly in some way show up in that formula that Stephanie was talking about.
Yes, exactly. Some of these are a little bit narrow, and I'm afraid to even entertain trying to answer them. I just, again, to get them on the record, what about livestock enclosures that are part of a forestry plan that might have less than 10%, but the rest of the property is densely wooded? Very complex question. I just say it's interesting to note that these, these detailed circumstances will come up. And this is the challenge you have in drafting the rules so that you can deal with these issues as they do. Wetlands has come up over and over and over. And here's a discussion of the 10%. I'm just scrolling down. Yep, here's another example, 20.6 acre property, 19.6 in the forestry plan. Entire property wooded. Again, that question is really a similar to the one previous. Okay, here's the one that you and I talked about, Brian. Do you ever foresee an opportunity for neighboring landowners who own less than 20 acres individually to be able to enter into this program together?
Aside from, as we've been doing outreach to people, this has probably been one of the most common questions we have.
Well, the thing is, they have to be under a plan, right? So most likely they would have to, do subdivisions and put them into an LLC and then have that land owned by the LLC. It's a very complicated situation to create multiple ownership situations. It's hard enough to have a common driveway between two houses, much less a managed property.
Yeah.
And then who's responsible if the easement is not followed?
I think the answer to that question is we've heard it multiple times. We're really going to look in to see if there's some creative way to do it. But right now, I don't have any kind of an answer for you. There's a question about conservation blueprint. Steve, you want to answer that one?
Sure. Conservation blueprint, the platform is hosts a lot of data layers that seek to identify properties that are good quality for a variety of conservation purpose and preservation purpose. They have an ag model that looks at properties great for farm preservation. They have a water quality model. They have a one for open space and urban open space. So what it does is it brings in a lot of different GIS or mapping layers that we that that show the different attributes of properties, and it's a way for all the conservation community to identify, where they all, want to focus their efforts. We will certainly be looking at all the GIS layers and the data available to come and that we want to focus on based on what we hear from our outreach. And we want to identify, which of those attributes have data that's available statewide, that's consistent, and that's reliable. And we'll seek to use that data to build our model that will ultimately go into the formula that we use in coordination with the appraisal. We'll drive this formula to with the idea that we're incentivizing and paying landowners more for properties that have those attributes that we really want to bring into the program.
Do you think that you might use fragmentation as an element of scoring? So that if you're adjacent to another property, for example, that's already been enrolled in the program, would that give me perhaps, I'm just suggesting that it might be a methodology of increasing the scoring level.
Yes, right. Similar to our ag model, contiguity of properties is something that's very important. Whether it's contiguity, and I'd like to hear from folks, whether it's typically we value contiguity to other preserved properties. But forest size is something that we would certainly want to take into consideration. Thinking things like soils, environmental attributes are things that we would probably take into consideration, whether that's groundwater recharge or riparian buffers, that kind of thing, or things we've heard. So again, we're trying to get our cues from from these sessions, and also look at the data that's available that we can use to put into that model.
Okay. And let's see, there's a few more just popped up. Will the funds for farmland preservation and woodland preservation be coming from the same pot of money?
Yeah.
Stephanie, you can answer that if you want.
Yes. Basically,
Okay.
we don't really, I don't know that, because the program is just in development, there's not an appropriation yet for it, but our funds all come from the corporate business tax funds through the Preserve New Jersey Act. So it would still be funded in a similar way.
Alrighty. Just looking to see if there's anything that might be relevant to you in your work. There's a reference here to looking at other states to see if there's other states that have similar programs that you might benefit from. I'm sure you have done that.
Yeah, we're looking at what other states, Virginia, Maryland, have woodland easement programs. I've been in contact with those folks. So listen, we're gonna do what's right for New Jersey, but we also don't want to completely reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. So.
Yeah. So one thing that Brian mentioned earlier, I did want to point out to everyone, is he mentioned an 80% funding opportunity for NGOs and for nonprofits. And I believe presently that's 50% for agriculture. There is a bill pending to alter that, but at the moment it's 50%. So I think, number one, that's a kind of a hat tip to the value of forests and the value that the legislators put on forests, meaning that they wanted to fund this program to the 80% level for those. And I think it's a great opportunity for those nonprofits who are on this call to really focus some efforts on conservation without obligation, meaning that they're not doing the work, but the landowner is continuing to do it. And I really appreciate, Brian, this consideration. We don't know yet what it will be, but the participation in the reimbursement programs is really a great thing for the landowners, because the management of woodlands, the cost has gotten so high, especially with the various crises like the ash crises and other issues that we're having. The management of woodlands, the cost has become disproportionately high. And the other thing that's going on in our community of forest landowners in Jersey is an aging process where we have a 65-year-old average, which is actually higher than that now, and 25% over 73. So this kind of a program is definitely part of their planning process for trying to monetize their land ownership and be able to stay on their properties and yet perhaps pay people to do work or whatever is necessary. So this program is one that is near and dear to my heart.
Agreed.
There was a reference here, a nice little suggestion here at the end. I think it's a wonderful well, I'll switch two things together. How would this program work with carbon sequestration programs? And again, this all relates back to your woodland management plan and your stewardship plan. So however the goals of the stewardship plan are drafted, if there's carbon sequestration included in that, that would be there. But I don't think there's any integration. Am I correct, Brian?
Well, integration as far as a requirement or preventing, again, just like harvesting or any of the other practices, if it can be approved as part of your plan and doesn't conflict, with your plan, then I don't see any reason why we would have any desire to even want to step in front of those kind of efforts.
Agreed. And there's a nice little thing that would be a wonderful thing to close on the questions. I like the preserved farmland logo and signs. I guess you generate something similar for preserved forest or preserved woodland. Great suggestion.
Maybe I'm not soliciting. Maybe we should allow people to submit their own ideas and we'll take a vote.
Well, it certainly could be cool, but it's a nice idea. And it really, the signs that we do have on our woodlands, people ask about them all the time. So
we'll definitely have signs and logos for sure. We just don't have them. Well, Dave, I'll give credit to Dave Clapp for the one that was on some of the earlier slides that was kind of thrown together hastily. So we don't have anything official yet, but we're definitely going to.
Very cool. So is there anything anyone in your team or you, Brian, would like to say in wrapping up? We have a really nice thank you at the end here for all your service to the future of New Jersey forests. So very, very nice.
Yeah. Again, as far as our internal working group here, our team, we're excited. This is certainly a challenge for us. We certainly have plenty of other things to do, but it's not often that in your professional career, no matter what you're doing, you get to work on something that's so new and has such big implications, but positive implications. So where you can really make a difference and frankly work with landowners in a cooperative way, in a completely voluntary way. I don't want to overpromise anything because we're still too early, but we're all looking forward to it, and we take your input seriously with anything. And it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it. We cannot let perfect be the enemy of good. I steal that from the executive director, Chuck Rohr, right? You're never going to create any program that's going to make everybody 100% happy. We need to accept that. That's just a reality of adulthood, right? Of being an adult, of the life and the world we live in. We're going to try to balance everybody's interest in this, but pay attention to the landowner's interest first.
Okay, so before we hit the disconnect button and wish everybody a good night, everybody try to grab that little QR code that's still on the screen so you can help Brian out with his project. And other than that, I thank all of you for a wonderful evening, super educational. And, this is just really, really important. Look at all those thank yous that are coming up on the screen.
And Rich, one last thing, for anybody on the call that maybe knows Stephanie better than me or Steve or Dave, anybody is welcome to reach out to any one of the four of us with any questions, comments, concerns, or maybe it's just a matter of whoever you can get a hold of when you call the office. So call any one of us.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all for your participation and for your great work. And we look forward to the next iteration where you have a little bit more information to let us know what's going on with the program. And we'll probably come back to you for some input on our estate planning as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. And have a wonderful night.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
Night.